I'm Mariana, 58 years old. I buried Robert 3 days ago. The will, just an old car. My daughter-in-law laughed, failure, when I started it. His voice, trust me one more time. I followed coordinates to the mountains. What I found changed everything. I thought I knew about him. Before we continue, like, subscribed, your city, comment below. 3 days after we buried Robert, I found myself in Fernando's office, surrounded by mahogany furniture that smelled of old money and other people's inheritances. The leather chair beneath me was cold, even through my black dress, the same one I'd worn to the funeral, still carrying the faint scent of cemetery flowers and rain. My children sat on either side of me. Julia picked at her cuticles, a nervous habit she'd had since childhood. David stared at the wall, his jaw tight. Patricia, my daughter-in-law, perched on the edge of her seat like a vulture waiting for roadkill, her designer purse clutched in her lap. A few distant relatives I barely recognized filled the remaining chairs, their faces wearing that peculiar expression people get when they're pretending grief but calculating inheritance. Fernando adjusted his glasses and broke the seal on a manila envelope. The sound seemed impossibly loud. The last will and testament of Robert James Mitchell, he began, his voice falling into that practiced monotone lawyers use when delivering news that will change lives. I held my breath. 30 years of marriage, 30 years of modest dinners and sensible shoes and cancelled vacations. Surely Robert had saved something. He'd always been so careful with money, sometimes maddeningly so. Fernando's eyes met mine briefly. Was that pity? Before he continued, to my beloved wife, Mariana, I leave my 2015 Ford Fiesta, currently parked at our residence, along with all personal effects contained within. Silence dropped like a stone into water. That's it. Patricia's voice shattered the quiet. That piece of junk in the driveway. Fernando cleared his throat. That concludes the estate distribution. The vehicle is valued at approximately $4,800. I couldn't breathe. The room tilted slightly. Or maybe I did. 30 years. A rusted Ford Fiesta. Patricia's laugh started as a snort, then grew into something cruel and sharp. Oh my God! Oh my actual God! She turned to David, her eyes bright with vindictive amusement. Your father was a manager for 30 years at that hardware store, and this is what he leaves. A car that probably needs $1,000 in repairs. Patricia! David's voice was weak, embarrassed. No, David, let's be honest for once. She looked at me, and I saw something in her face I'd never quite seen before. Contempt mixed with pity. I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. But Dad was a failure. 30 years of work and he couldn't even leave behind enough for a decent funeral. We had to chip in. Remember? Julia was crying now, silent tears tracking mascara down her cheeks. Stop it. Patricia. Why, because it's rude to speak the truth. Robert Mitchell was a nice man, I'm sure, but let's not pretend he accomplished anything. Patricia stood, gathering her purse with theatrical finality. 3 decades and he couldn't even buy life insurance. That's not noble poverty. That's just sad. The relatives shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. Fernando opened his mouth, then closed it again. As if even he couldn't find words to soften this moment, they left in a slow exodus of whispered condolences that felt more like apologies for witnessing my humiliation. Julia squeezed my hand. David wouldn't meet my eyes. Patricia walked out first, her heels clicking an angry rhythm on the hardwood floor. Then I was alone in the parking lot, standing beside the Fiesta. The Carolina sun beat down mercilessly, making the car's faded blue paint look even more pathetic. A door panel was dented. The bumper sticker Robert had put on 15 years ago, support local business, was peeling at the corners. I thought about defending him back there, about the quiet way he'd loved me, about how presence matters more than presence. But I hadn't. The words had died in my throat, choked by my own sudden, terrible doubt. Had Patricia been right? I got in, gripping the worn steering wheel where Robert's hands had rested for years. The seat still held the ghost of his shape. That's when I finally let myself cry. Hard, gasping sobs that felt like they'd tear me apart. Then the GPS screen flickered to life. The GPS coordinates glowed blue in the dimming light. 35,500 8,000 40 to go W below them, a single line of text. For Mariana, my last gift, please drive. Then Robert's voice filled the car, so clear, so alive, that I gasped and looked at the passenger seat, half expecting to see him there. My love, if you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. I know you're hurting. I know you're confused. But please, trust me one more time. Start driving. I promise everything will make sense. The recording ended. The GPS pulsed, waiting for me to choose, accept route or cancel. I sat there for 20 minutes, hands shaking, while the sun set behind Fernando's office building. My phone buzzed. Julia checking on me. But I couldn't answer, couldn't think. Patricia's words kept echoing. Failure. 30 years. Nothing to show. But this voice, this message, Robert had planned this. I started the engine. The night passed in fragments of sleepless anxiety. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Robert's face the day before he died. Peaceful, almost relieved. Had he known it was time? Had he been waiting to make sure everything was ready by dawn? I'd made my decision. I told no one. Not Julia, not David, certainly not Patricia. I packed a small bag, left a vague note about needing time alone, and got in the Fiesta as the neighborhood still slept. The route calculated. 3 hours and 17 minutes to somewhere near Asheville. The car groaned as I merged onto the highway, its ancient suspension protesting every bump. I hadn't driven this far alone in years. Robert had always insisted on driving. Now I understood why. He was protecting this car, keeping it functional for this exact journey. Memories ambushed me at every mile marker. Robert patching his work shirts instead of buying new ones. The winter he wore a coat with a broken zipper because it still keeps me warm. Our 15th anniversary when he'd given me a potted plant instead of jewelry saying, "This will grow with us." I'd smiled then, hiding disappointment. Now I wondered what I'd missed in those moments. What subtext I'd been too blind to read. The Fiesta began to overheat an hour outside Asheville. Steam hissed from under the hood as I coasted into a tiny town called Marshall. A mechanic emerged from a shop that looked older than me, wiping his hands on a rag. "Radiator leak," he said after a quick look. "I can patch it, but this car's seen better days." While he worked, he kept glancing at the dashboard. "Ma'am, I don't mean to pry, but that GPS system you got there, that's expensive tech, real expensive. Costs more than this whole car's worth. Easy." My stomach twisted. My husband installed it. He knew his electronics then. "This is professional-grade routing equipment, the kind real estate scouts use." He studied me curiously. "He in that business. Hardware store manager," I said automatically. Then stopped. Was he? Really, the mountains rose before me like ancient guardians as I drove the final stretch. The GPS led me off the highway, onto progressively smaller roads, paved to gravel to dirt. The Fiesta bounced and rattled, but it kept going, as if it knew this path by heart. I almost turned back 3 times. This was insane. Chasing coordinates based on a recording, driving into wilderness alone. What if it was a mistake? What if Robert's illness had confused him at the end, and I'd find nothing but empty forest? Then the trees opened into a clearing, and my breath caught. A cabin, cedar wood weathered to soft gray, with a green metal roof and a stone chimney, window boxes with flowers. Someone had planted flowers. A wraparound porch with 2 rocking chairs, positioned to face the sunset. Beyond it, rows of young trees with white protection, wraps around their trunks. It looked like something from a dream, or a life I'd never lived. I parked and sat frozen, staring. A small sign hung by the door, carved wood with burned lettering. "Welcome home, Mariana." My hands found the door handle. My legs carried me forward, though they felt distant, not quite mine. On the porch, tucked inside a weatherproof box, I found keys and an envelope. The envelope contained a deed, property title, my name, Mariana Elizabeth Mitchell, listed as sole owner. 30 acres, purchased 5 years ago, fully paid. The key turned smoothly in the lock. Inside, everything was perfect. Not fancy, but perfect. A stone fireplace, comfortable furniture in colors I loved, soft blues and creams, bookshelves waiting to be filled. Through the kitchen window, I could see a vegetable garden maintained and thriving. On the dining table, a wooden box with brass hinges, a note on top in Robert's handwriting. Start here. I pulled out a chair. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore, and opened the box. 10 sealed envelopes, numbered, a leather journal, photographs, and one letter on top, dated 4 years ago, beginning with words that made the world tilt. My dearest Mariana, by now you know about my heart. I'm sorry I never told you. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the letter twice before I could focus on the words. My dearest Mariana, by now you know about my heart. I'm sorry I never told you. The doctors gave me 4, maybe 5 years when they found it. Advanced heart failure, they said, like I was a car with too many miles. I made them promise not to contact you. I needed to do this my way. I know what you're thinking, that I was cruel to keep it secret, that we could have had treatments, second opinions, miracles. But Mariana, my love, there were no miracles left for this old heart, only expensive ways to die slower, and I couldn't bear to spend our last years in hospitals, watching hope drain from your eyes with every failed procedure. So I chose differently. I chose to give you something that would last after I couldn't. This cabin, this land, they're yours, have been yours for 5 years now, legally and completely. I bought them with money I saved. Money you never knew about because I was too proud and too stubborn to share my plan until it was complete. Start with envelope 1, then 2. Take your time. I'll explain everything, I promise. Forever your Robert. I pressed the letter to my chest and sobbed. Loud, ugly crying that echoed off the cabin walls. 4 years. He'd known for 4 years and smiled at me every morning, made me coffee, kissed my forehead, never once let me see the fear. Or had I simply not looked? When I could breathe again, I opened envelope 1. The first 3 letters detailed the property purchase. Robert had found this land 6 years ago, long before his diagnosis. Just in case, he'd paid $180,000 cash. Cash I didn't know existed, accumulated over decades of what I thought was barely scraping by. Every dollar we didn't spend on restaurants, I invested, he wrote. Every vacation we postponed, every old car we kept running, every no to things that didn't matter, it all went here, to what did matter. To you. The 4th letter made me laugh and cry simultaneously. It was a planting schedule. Robert had personally planted every tree I could see from the windows. Apple, pear, cherry, plum. He'd calculated their maturity rates down to the season. They'll start producing fruit in your 2nd year here, maybe 3rd for the cherries. They're stubborn like me. I wanted you to have fresh fruit from trees I planted. Wanted you to taste something sweet and know I'm still taking care of you. I walked to the window. 20, 30 trees, maybe more. Their young trunks wrapped against deer and winter. He'd planted them knowing he'd never taste their fruit. Knowing I would. Envelope 5, introduced Manuel. His full name is Manuel Garcia. He's 60, a widower. Kind and honest. I hired him 5 years ago to maintain the property. He knows everything, Mariana. He's been my partner in this secret, and I trust him with my life, which means I trust him with yours, as if summoned by the letter. I heard footsteps on the porch. My heart hammered. Through the window, I saw a man, Latino, weathered face, gentle eyes, carrying a basket of vegetables. I opened the door before he could knock. Mrs. Mitchell. He removed his hat, clutching it in work-roughened hands. I am Manuel. I hope I don't frighten you, Mr. Robert. He told me you would come. He said to give you time to read, then to come introduce myself. His English carried a soft accent that reminded me of summer rain. You knew, I whispered, all this time. Sigh, yes. His eyes grew wet. He made me promise never to tell. Said it would ruin the surprise, ruin his plan. I wanted to refuse him. Seemed wrong, keeping such secrets from a wife. But he showed me the letters, explained his reasons, and I understood. A man does not plan such things without great love. I stepped aside. Please, come in. Manuel entered, setting the basket on the kitchen counter. Tomatoes, squash, fresh herbs, all from the garden I'd seen. I picked these this morning, the garden. It needs daily care, Mr. Robert. He designed it for you. Easy vegetables, he said, ones that grow strong without too much fuss. How long have you been doing this? I asked. Maintaining everything. 5 years he pays me. Paid me. Very well, very fair. And Mrs. Mitchell. Manuel's voice cracked. He was good man. The best I ever worked for. He talk about you always. Manuel, he say. I am building a sanctuary for an angel. That is what he call you. His angel. I couldn't speak. Could barely stand. Come, Manuel said gently. Let me show you the rest. There is much to see. Manuel led me through the property like a tour guide, revealing a hidden kingdom. The 30 acres unfolded in carefully planned sections. The orchard we'd already seen. Then a meadow with 3 beehives, for honey and to help the trees. A small creek with stone-lined banks. Mr. Robert, he has water rights, very valuable. And a cleared area with raised garden beds, still producing late-season vegetables. He thought of everything, Manuel said with quiet pride. Even the bees. He researched for months which type best for this elevation. He wants you to have sweet things always. We returned to the cabin as evening fell. Manuel showed me how the wood stove worked, where the propane tanks were stored. Which breaker controlled what. Before leaving, he paused at the door. Mrs. Mitchell, there is more letters. Yes, in the box. Yes, 6 more. He nodded slowly. Then you will learn the rest, I think. I think maybe you need to sit down for those ones. He touched his hat brim. I live just 2 miles down the road. You have my number if you need anything. Anything at all. After he left, I made tea. Found the kettle exactly where I would have placed it. The mugs in the logical cabinet. And returned to the dining table. The remaining letters waited like unopened presents on Christmas morning. Except I wasn't sure if they contained gifts or grenades. I opened envelope 6. Mariana, what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible. Please read it all before you judge me. My pulse quickened. I was never just a hardware store manager, or rather, I was. But that was only half my life. For the past 25 years, I worked as a real estate investment consultant under the name Robert M. Cartier. The words blurred. I read them again, then again. It started small. A friend asked advice on buying rental property. I helped, charged nothing. Word spread. More people asked. I started charging modest fees. Then I started investing my own money alongside theirs. Mariana, I was good at it. Better than good. The next letter, number 7, contained spreadsheets, printed investment summaries, property holdings, business stakes. The numbers were so large they stopped meaning anything. $247,000 here, $680,000 there, a column of investments totaling, I counted 3 times to be sure, $8.7 million. Every penny you thought we couldn't spend. Robert wrote, I was spending, just not on things that rust or fade. I bought land before development, invested in small businesses with potential, took stakes in ventures others overlooked, and I did it quietly, carefully, using the network I built through my other job. I stood up so fast the chair fell backward. This was insane. Impossible. Robert drove a 20-year-old truck, wore the same winter coat for a decade. We ate leftovers for lunch and clipped coupons. Why? I said aloud to the empty cabin. Why live like that if you didn't have to? The next letter answered as if he'd heard me. Because visible wealth attracts problems, taxes, yes, but worse. Family expecting handouts, friends with suddenly urgent needs, strangers with schemes. I watched my own father lose everything trying to look successful. He spent himself into debt maintaining appearances while my mother went hungry in private. Robert had never talked much about his father. Now I understood why. I swore I'd never let that happen to you. So I lived as if we had little and invested as if we had vision. The hardware store job was real. I liked it, liked helping people fix things. But in the evenings, after you went to sleep, I worked my other job, the one that built your future. A business card fell from envelope 8. Fernando Alves, attorney at law, a note attached. Fernando knows everything. He's managed the legal structure for 15 years. He's expecting your call. Trust him, Mariana. I do. My phone was in my hand before I consciously decided to call. Fernando answered on the second ring. Mrs. Mitchell, I wondered when I'd hear from you. Is it real? My voice sounded foreign. Small. All of it. Every word. Your husband was one of the most astute investors I've ever represented, and one of the most secretive. A pause. There's more to discuss. more than can be explained over the phone. Can you come to my office tomorrow? There's someone else who wants to meet you. Who? A business associate of Robert's, a man named Andrew Blackwell. He's been waiting a long time to tell you about the man who saved his life. I agreed to come, hung up, and sat in the growing darkness of the cabin. Outside crickets sang, the creek murmured, somewhere an owl called, and I realized I'd never known my husband at all. Fernando's office was in a town called Black Mountain. 40 minutes from the cabin, I drove there through morning fog that clung to the mountains like secrets refusing to lift. My phone had 17 missed calls. Julia, David, even 2 from Patricia. I texted Julia a brief, "I'm fine, need time alone," but nothing more. How could I explain this when I didn't understand it myself? The office was smaller than I expected, tucked above a bookstore on a quiet street. Fernando greeted me with the same gentle formality he'd shown at the will reading. But his eyes held something different now. Respect, maybe, or curiosity about how I was handling Robert's revelations. "Coffee?" he offered. I shook my head on just answers. He smiled slightly. "Your husband said you'd say that." He pulled out 3 thick folders, each labeled with meticulous tabs. "These represent Robert's, your portfolio, first folder, real estate holdings, second, business investments and partnerships, third, liquid assets and ongoing revenue streams." The numbers swam as he walked me through them. 17 active investments, properties in 3 states, stakes in businesses ranging from a regional grocery chain to a tech startup developing agricultural software, and the income, monthly passive income averaging $35,000. The beauty of Robert's strategy, Fernando explained, was patience. He never chased trends, never over-leveraged. He found undervalued opportunities and held them until they matured. Some investments took 15 years to pay off, but they did pay off. Why the secrecy? The question burst out of me, sharp with frustration. Why live like we were barely surviving when this existed? Fernando leaned back, studying me. Did Robert ever tell you about his father? Only that he died when Robert was young. Robert was 17. His father was a salesman who spent every penny trying to look successful. Big house, new cars, expensive clothes. Then the economy shifted and it all collapsed. They lost everything. Robert's mother worked 3 jobs to keep them fed. She died of a heart attack at 52, worn out from the stress. Fernando's voice softened. Robert told me once that his father's pride killed his mother as surely as if he'd pushed her off a bridge. The room felt too small suddenly, too warm. He swore he'd never value appearance over security, never risk leaving you vulnerable for the sake of looking prosperous. Fernando slid a document across the desk. Everything has been in your name for years. Mariana, he set it up so that even if his businesses failed, even if he died suddenly, you'd be protected. That was always his priority, not wealth. Protection. Before I could respond, the door opened. A man entered, mid-60s, silver hair, expensive suit that somehow didn't look pretentious on him. His eyes were kind, but carried the weight of someone who'd seen hard times. "Mrs. Mitchell," he extended his hand. "Andrew Blackwell, I'm grateful you agreed to meet me." We moved to a conference table. Andrew sat across from me, hands folded, and for a moment said nothing. Then, "Robert saved my life in 2008. Andrew's story spilled out like confession. He'd owned a small manufacturing company. Furniture, locally made. The financial crisis hit. Banks stopped lending, orders dried up. He was 3 weeks from bankruptcy, about to lose his business and his family's home. A friend mentioned Robert, said he sometimes consulted on investments. I almost didn't call. I had nothing to offer, no collateral, but I was desperate. Andrew's voice thickened. "Robert met me at a diner." I explained everything. He listened, asked questions, looked at my books. Then he said, "Your business is sound. You just need bridge capital." He wrote me a check for $200,000 on the spot. I couldn't speak. No contract, no collateral, just a handshake and his word, "Pay me back when you can." It took me 3 years, but I did with interest, even though he didn't ask for it. Andrew leaned forward. When I tried to thank him publicly, tried to tell people what he'd done, he refused, made me promise never to use his real name. never to connect him to the investment. He said, "I don't need credit. I need you to succeed so I can help someone else." "How many others?" I whispered. Andrew and Fernando exchanged glances. "We've identified at least 15 families," Fernando said quietly, "that Robert helped in similar ways. College tuitions paid anonymously, mortgages rescued, small businesses saved, all done through shell companies and trusts, so no one knew it was him." The room tilted. I gripped the table edge. "Your husband wasn't just an investor." "Mrs. Mitchell," Andrew said, "he was a silent guardian to this entire community, a hero no one knew to thank, and I'd let Patricia call him a failure." I spent the next 3 days at the cabin, unable to face the world beyond its walls. Manuel brought groceries and asked no questions when he found me sitting on the porch at dawn, still in yesterday's clothes, Robert's journal open in my lap. The journal was the hardest part, the most revealing, the most heartbreaking. April 3rd, 2001. Today I closed on the Morrison property, 40 acres outside Hendersonville, purchased for $89K in 15 years. When the highway extension comes through, it'll be worth 10 times that. Mariana asked tonight why we couldn't go to the beach this summer like the Hendersons. I said maybe next year. Saw disappointment flash across her face before she smiled and said, "Of course, we'll save it for something special." I'm a coward. I should tell her we could afford 10 beach vacations, but then I'd have to explain everything. And the plan isn't complete. Not yet. Not safe enough yet. June 17, 2003. M's birthday today. I bought her a used bicycle from the church sale. Spent $40. She loved it. Said it was perfect for evening rides together while she was in the shower. I finalized the Riverside investment. $180K into the new development. Should triple in value by 2010. I could have bought her a car, jewelry, a trip to Europe. Instead, I bought her safety. She doesn't know she needs. Does that make me selfish or selfless? Some days I can't tell. September 29, 2008. The economy is collapsing. I watch the news with Im and she squeezes my hand, worried about our savings. "We'll be okay," she says. "We don't need much." She has no idea we're not just okay. We're thriving while others are drowning. My investments are structured to weather this. I should feel proud. Instead, I feel like a liar sitting next to the most honest person I know. Entry after entry, year after year, Robert's private anguish poured out in blue ink, each page revealing a man torn between protection and partnership, between secrecy and sharing. December 12, 2015. Doctor confirmed it today. Heart failure. Advanced. 4 years, maybe 5 if I'm lucky. I sat in the parking lot for an hour before driving home. Em was making dinner when I arrived, humming, happy. She asked how my day was. I said, fine. I'm going to lie to her for the rest of my life. But I'm going to make sure those lies buy her decades of security. I closed the journal, unable to read more. My hands were shaking. Anger and love warred inside me so violently, I thought I might split apart. How dare he decide alone? How dare he love me so much without letting me love him back the same way? The next envelope waited. Number 9. Instructions said, open only when you're angry with me. I tore it open. Inside was a USB drive and a note. Plug this into the laptop in the bedroom closet. Password is the date we met. Watch it all, Mariana. Then decide if I was wrong. The laptop was new, expensive. I found it exactly where he'd said. The password, October 23rd, 1994. Unlocked it immediately, one file on the desktop, for my angry wife, MP4. I almost laughed. Even in death, he knew me. The video opened on Robert, sitting in what looked like a hotel room. He was thinner than I remembered, his color slightly gray. This was recorded near the end. Hello, my love. If you're watching this, you're furious with me. Good, you should be. Tears came instantly. You're thinking I didn't trust you, that I robbed you of choices, that 30 years of partnership meant I should have shared everything. He paused, looking directly at the camera, at me. You're right. About all of it. He leaned forward. But Mariana, I knew you. God, did I know you if I'd told you about the money? You would have insisted we spend it. On us, on the kids, on everyone but your future self. You would have fought every investment, every delayed gratification because you're generous to a fault. His eyes glistened. And if I'd told you about my heart, you would have insisted on treatments. On fighting, you would have drained every account, searching for miracles that don't exist. We'd have spent our last years in hospital rooms, chasing hope, and you'd be sitting in our old house right now, broke and alone, wondering how to survive. He wiped his eyes. I couldn't let that happen, so I chose. I chose to be the villain in our story, so you could be safe in your next chapter. I chose to carry the secret so you didn't have to carry the fear. The video showed him pulling out a photograph. Our wedding day. Both of us impossibly young. Every morning for 30 years, I woke up next to you and thought, how do I protect this? This woman, this love, this life. And every night I went to sleep knowing I'd done something, however small, to build walls around your future. His voice cracked. My greatest joy was you. My greatest fear was leaving you vulnerable. So I sacrificed being understood for you being secure. He stared at the camera, through it, into me. Forgive me or don't, but know this. I loved you more than my own truth. The video ended. I sat in the darkness and wept. I called Julia the next morning. I need you and David to come to Asheville. There's something about your father you need to know. Mom, are you okay? You've been gone for days. I'm fine. Better than fine. Just come, both of you, tomorrow. Silence. Then, Patricia wants to come too. Every muscle in my body tensed. Fine, let her. They arrived the next afternoon in David's Mercedes, Patricia wearing sunglasses that probably cost more than the Fiesta. Julia hugged me tight on the porch. David hung back. Uncertain, Patricia surveyed the cabin with barely concealed disdain. This is where you've been. She wrinkled her nose. Mom, this is the middle of nowhere. Come inside. My voice was steady, calm. I'd spent hours preparing for this moment, arranging Robert's letters and documents across the dining table like evidence at a trial. They filed in. Julia noticed the papers first. Mom, what is all this? Sit down. All of you. I waited until they settled, then picked up the first letter. Your father left me more than a car. He left me this, 30 acres of land, this cabin, and the truth about who he really was. For the next 3 hours, I walked them through everything. The diagnosis Robert hid, the investments he made, the $8.7 million portfolio, the secret identity as Robert M. Carter, the 15 families he helped, the trees he planted knowing he'd never see them fruit. David went pale halfway through and didn't speak again. Julia cried, pressing her hand to her mouth. Patricia's face cycled through disbelief, shock, and something that looked almost like panic. That's impossible, Patricia finally said. No one lives like he did if they're secretly rich. No one. He did. I spread the bank statements, property deeds, investment summaries across the table. Because this was never about being rich. It was about keeping me safe. I played them the video. Robert's voice filled the cabin, explaining his choices, his philosophy, his love. Julia sobbed openly. David buried his face in his hands. Even Patricia went silent, her expensive sunglasses dangling forgotten from one hand. When it ended, Julia spoke first, her voice barely a whisper. We judged him. Oh, God, we judged him so harshly. I had to chip in for his funeral, David said, each word like broken glass. I complained about it to Patricia, said he couldn't even plan properly for his own death. He looked at me, eyes red. Mom, I'm so sorry. You didn't know, I said quietly. None of us did. Patricia stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Her shoulders were rigid. This doesn't make sense. Why would anyone choose to look poor? To be pitied? Because looking rich makes you a target, I said. His father taught him that. Appearances destroyed his family once. He refused to let it happen again. But the humiliation, Patricia insisted. Turning, the way people talked about him, about you, didn't that matter? Not as much as my security. The words came out harder than I intended. And Patricia, the only person who truly humiliated anyone was you. At the will reading, you called him a failure in front of his family. Her face flushed. I didn't know. No, you didn't. Because you valued what you could see over what might exist beneath the surface. Your father-in-law was extraordinary, but you couldn't see it because he drove an old car. The silence was crushing. Julia broke it. What are you going to do, Mom, with all of this? I looked around at them. My children, grown and flawed, and mine, my daughter-in-law, still struggling to process that her contempt had been aimed at a giant. Your father didn't leave instructions for that. He trusted me to decide. I picked up the last, unopened envelope, number 10. But first, there's one more letter. I haven't read it yet. I wanted to wait until we were together. My hands shook as I opened it. Robert's handwriting, as familiar as my own heartbeat, filled 2 pages. I read aloud, Mariana, if you're reading this with our family present, you've decided to share my secrets. I'm glad. They should know, not for my sake. I won't be there to enjoy vindication, for theirs. So they learn that a man's worth isn't measured in what he displays, but in what he protects. To Julia and David, your mother is wealthier than you imagined, but that doesn't mean she owes you anything. I've set aside funds for your futures, but they come with conditions. Prove you understand what I've tried to teach, work hard, live humbly, value substance over show, and to whoever judged me harshest. Yes, Patricia, I expect it was you. I forgive you, but I hope you'll learn this. The people who look poorest might be richer than you'll ever be, in ways money can't measure. Patricia's face crumpled. She left the cabin. Dr. Banging behind her, the lawsuit arrived 2 weeks later, delivered by a process server who apologized as he handed me the papers. Patricia was contesting the will, alleging diminished mental capacity and undue influence. She'd hired a Charlotte firm known for aggressive estate litigation. Her argument was elegant in its cruelty. No sane man would live in self-imposed poverty while sitting on millions. Therefore, Robert must have been mentally compromised when he structured his estate, and I, his loyal wife, must have manipulated him in his final years. David called me that night, his voice ragged. Mom, I didn't know she was going to do this. I swear I didn't. But you didn't stop her either. Silence. Then, she's my wife, she says. She says we're entitled to half, that you'll waste it or give it all away, and Dad would have wanted us provided for. Your father did provide for you. The trust he established comes to you when you turn 40 or demonstrate financial responsibility, whichever comes first. I kept my voice level, though fury burned in my chest. But Patricia wants it now, wants to prove Robert was crazy so she can get her hands on it faster. I don't know what to do. David sounded young. Lost. Figure it out, because I'm not letting her destroy your father's memory to fund her shopping habit. Fernando assured me the lawsuit was baseless. Robert's documentation is immaculate. Medical records show he was completely competent. Multiple witnesses can attest to his mental clarity. This is a nuisance suit, nothing more. But nothing more meant depositions, hearings, lawyers' bills. It meant sitting in a courtroom while Patricia's attorney painted Robert as paranoid and delusional, suffering from hoarding disorder and pathological fear of spending. They brought in a psychiatrist who'd never met Robert, but confidently diagnosed him based on his lifestyle choices. Classic presentation of financial anxiety disorder, likely stemming from childhood poverty trauma. Andrew testified for us, describing Robert's sharp business acumen and complex investment strategies. A mentally impaired person doesn't successfully manage 17 simultaneous investments over 25 years. Mr. Mitchell's mind was one of the finest I've encountered. Manuel took the stand, nervous in his Sunday suit, and destroyed Patricia's case with simple honesty. Mr. Robert, he explained everything to me. Why he lives simple, why he save, why he protect Mrs. Mariana. He showed me the letters, years before he gets sick. Everything was planned when he was healthy. He was not crazy. He was wise. Julia testified too, breaking down halfway through. My father was the sanest person I knew. He just had different priorities than we understood. That's not mental illness. That's just being different. Being better. Maybe. David didn't testify. He sat in the back of the courtroom, avoiding everyone's eyes. The judge, a black woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and sharper questions, listened to everything. Then she asked to see Robert's letters, his journals, the video he'd made. We reconvened 3 days later for her ruling. I've reviewed all evidence submitted, Judge Morrison began, her voice carrying authority that silenced the courtroom instantly. I've read Mr. Mitchell's letters, watched his recorded statements, and examined documentation spanning decades. I've also consulted independent experts regarding his mental state. Patricia leaned forward, her lawyer beside her looking confident. This court finds no evidence whatsoever of diminished capacity or undue influence. What I do find is a man who chose to live counterculturally, prioritizing long-term security over short-term gratification. Judge Morrison looked directly at Patricia. That's not mental illness, Mrs. Mitchell, that's wisdom. Patricia's face went white. Mr. Mitchell documented his philosophy extensively. He explained his reasoning clearly. He made his choices while in perfect mental health, years before any serious illness. The fact that his choices seem strange to some doesn't make them invalid. She paused. Frankly, if more people had Mr. Mitchell's foresight, fewer families would be fighting over scraps in my courtroom. The gavel came down. The will stands as written. Case dismissed. Mrs. Patricia Mitchell, your attorney will explain to you what frivolous litigation means and why this court is awarding costs against you. Fernando squeezed my shoulder. Andrew smiled. Manuel crossed himself and whispered something in Spanish that sounded like gratitude. Patricia stormed out, her lawyer scrambling after her with papers. David remained in the back row, face in his hands. When everyone else left, I walked to him. I'm getting a divorce, he said quietly. I should have done it the day she filed. I'm sorry, Mom, I'm so sorry. I sat beside him. Outside, through the courtroom windows, I could see mountains in the distance. Robert's Mountains. Your father would say this. Being sorry means nothing unless you become different. David nodded, tears falling. Then I'll become different, I promise. 1 year after Robert's death, I stood in the renovated hardware store where he'd spent 30 years helping people fix things. We'd transformed it into the Robert Mitchell Community Center, half museum, half resource hub for families struggling financially. Julia cut the ribbon, her 7-month belly pressing against the scissors. David stood beside her, thinner than before the divorce, but somehow more solid, more present. He'd started teaching financial literacy at the community college, turning his shame into purpose. Andrew had donated the building's renovation costs. Manuel maintained it as he maintained everything, with quiet dedication. Fernando had structured the legal foundation that would keep it running in perpetuity. Funded by the steady income from Robert's investments, the museum section displayed Robert's journals, some pages, not all. Some secrets remained ours. His tools from the store, photos of him helping customers. But the centerpiece was the wall of letters from families he'd helped anonymously. We tracked them down, asked them to share their stories. 23 letters hung framed under a heading. A hero no one knew to thank. The Resource Center offered what Robert would have wanted: free financial counseling, investment education for low-income families, small business mentoring. We called it the Patient Path, teaching Robert's philosophy of delayed gratification and strategic planning. Patricia hadn't attended. She'd moved to Atlanta, took a job at her father's company, sent David divorce papers that somehow portrayed her as the victim. He signed them without contest. During the ceremony, I read from Robert's final journal entry, written 3 days before he died. If I've done this right, Mariana won't just survive without me. She'll thrive. She'll take what I've built and make it better, bigger, more generous than I ever could. That's what love does. It multiplies even after the lover is gone. Especially then, my voice broke. Julia took my hand. The community applauded. Not for me, but for the man they'd worked beside for decades, never knowing his depth. That evening, I returned to the cabin. The orchard was heavy with fruit now. Just as Robert had calculated, Manuel had brought baskets, and we'd picked for hours, filling the truck bed with apples. Pears, plums, the cherries, stubborn as promised, would come next year. Inside, I'd hung photos on every wall. Our life together, seen now through a different lens. Robert fixing a neighbor's porch. Robert teaching David to change oil. Robert beside me at Julia's high school graduation. His suit jacket slightly too large because he'd lost weight and refused to buy a new one. In every photo, I looked for what I'd missed. The quiet satisfaction in his eyes, the small smile when I'd say we couldn't afford something, the way he'd watch me sometimes, as if memorizing my face. He'd been saying goodbye for 4 years, and I'd never noticed. The trust funds for Julia and David had activated on Julia's 40th birthday, just as Robert had planned. Not a lump sum. He'd been too smart for that. But structured payments tied to continued education, charitable giving, and demonstrated financial responsibility. Patricia would have fought it if she could. but the judge's ruling had been absolute. I'd used part of the estate to establish the Robert M. Carter Investment Fund, offering zero-interest loans to entrepreneurs who couldn't get traditional financing. Andrew managed it using Robert's criteria: character over credit score, vision over collateral. Manuel had become family, joining us for holidays, teaching Julia's soon-to-arrive baby Spanish nursery rhymes, maintaining the cabin and orchard with the same devotion he'd shown Robert. And I'd finally understood what Robert had been trying to tell me through 30 years of frugality. Love isn't what you spend on someone. It's what you sacrifice so they can thrive after you're gone. Late that night, I walked the property alone. The moon was full, turning everything silver. I stood among the fruit trees, Robert's trees bearing their first full harvest, and felt his presence so strongly I could almost hear him laugh. "You did it," I whispered to the darkness. "Everything you planned worked. I'm safe. The kids are learning. You saved so many people, and now they'll know it. You won, my love." The wind moved through the branches, and suddenly I was sobbing, not from grief anymore, but from gratitude so overwhelming it felt like drowning in light. "I'm sorry I didn't understand sooner," I said. "I'm sorry I ever doubted you. I'm sorry for every time I wished you were different. When you were already perfect." A branch creaked above me. An apple fell, landing at my feet. Perfectly ripe, ready to eat, I picked it up and bit into it, and it was the sweetest thing I'd ever tasted. Robert's final gift, waiting exactly when I needed it. 2 years after Robert's death, I thought I knew all his secrets. I was wrong. Fernando called on a Tuesday morning, his voice carrying the same cautious tone he'd used when first revealing Robert's empire. "Mariana, there's one more thing. Robert left instructions that I was to wait exactly 2 years before giving you this." I drove to his office with my heart hammering, unable to imagine what could be left. When I arrived, he handed me a sealed envelope, thick, official-looking, inside property deeds, for a small house in town, fully renovated and paid off, with an attached trust fund. The instruction letter read, "For our future grandchildren, let them start their adult lives debt-free, but not lesson-free. The house is modest because struggle builds character, but starting with shelter removes desperation. Teach them what I taught you by not teaching you, that security is built in silence, not announced in celebration." Julia's baby, Robert James, named for his grandfather, was 6 months old. This house would be his someday, a launching pad into adulthood. But there was more in the envelope. Another letter marked "Private." "Mariana only." I read it in Fernando's conference room. Door closed. "My love, if you're reading this, you've successfully navigated the maze I left behind. You've learned about the investments, weathered the family drama, and hopefully forgiven me for my secrets. But there's one more person I need you to find. 15 years ago, I met a teenage boy named Marcus Chen. He was homeless, brilliant, angry at the world. I found him sleeping behind the hardware store one winter. Instead of calling the police, I offered him work, then mentorship, then a path forward. I taught Marcus everything I knew about investing, about character, about building security in silence. He became like a son to me, the one I mentored while our own son barely spoke to me. Marcus doesn't know I've passed, doesn't know about you. Find him, Mariana. He deserves to know his mentor is gone, and you deserve to know the son Robert found when ours was too embarrassed to claim him." An address was attached. Marcus Chen, now 30, lived in Durham, ran his own investment consulting firm, small, selective, focused on underrepresented entrepreneurs. I found his website. His About Me page showed a handsome Asian American man with kind eyes and Robert's same slight smile. The bio mentioned a mentor who'd changed his life at 15, a hardware store manager who saw potential where others saw problems. This business exists because he taught me that wealth isn't about what you own, it's about what you protect. I called him from Fernando's office. Marcus answered on the third ring. "Chen Consulting." "Mr. Chen, my name is Mariana Mitchell. I'm calling about Robert Mitchell." A sharp intake of breath. "Robert, God, how is he? I've been trying to reach him for months, but his phone..." "Marcus," my voice broke on his name. "Robert passed away 2 years ago. Heart failure. The silence stretched so long, I thought he'd hung up then. No, that's not possible. He was fine last time I saw him. His voice shattered. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because I didn't know you existed until 10 minutes ago. We met the next day, at a coffee shop halfway between. Marcus was tall, well-dressed, but there was something in how he moved, cautious, watchful, that spoke of harder times. He brought a folder of papers, hands trembling as he set them down. "Robert saved my life," he said without preamble. I was 15, homeless, stealing food. He caught me taking sandwiches from his break room instead of calling the cops. He asked why, then he offered me a job, minimum wage, sweeping floors, but he stayed after hours. Teaching me math, investing, life. Marcus opened the folder, showing documents, GED certificate with Robert listed as mentor, community college transcripts. Robert had paid tuition, business license for Chen Consulting, initial capital provided by an anonymous investor that Marcus now realized was Robert. He never let me thank him properly, always deflected, said he was just paying forward what someone did for him once. Marcus's eyes were red. He made me promise something, that when I succeeded I'd find another kid like me and do the same. I've mentored 6 so far, all of them thriving. I showed him photos of Robert, the cabin, the family, played him the video of Robert explaining his philosophy. Marcus watched in silence, tears streaming. When it ended, he looked at me. I never knew he was married, never knew about his other life. He kept everything separate, like he was protecting both of us from each other. That was Robert's gift, I said. Protection we never knew we needed. Marcus became part of our family. He came to Thanksgiving at the cabin, holding baby Robert James with the same careful tenderness he brought to everything. He and David formed an unexpected friendship. 2 men who'd both failed to appreciate Robert fully, both working to honor him now. On the 2nd anniversary of Robert's death, we held a memorial service at the community center. Over 200 people came. Families he'd helped, businesses he'd saved, young people he'd mentored. Marcus spoke, David spoke, Andrew spoke, each one telling a piece of a man who'd lived in fragments, revealing himself only in parts, so no one could see the whole extraordinary picture. Until after he was gone, I stood to speak last, holding the letter Robert had written me on what must have been his final day, the one I'd never shared with anyone. "Mariana, my greatest fear was that I'd leave you alone. My greatest hope is that I've left you surrounded by security, by community, by love that will outlive my heartbeat. If you're reading this at my memorial, look around, see all the lives I touched in silence. That's not me being humble, that's me being strategic. I multiplied myself through others so you'd never be without help. You were never married to just one man. You were married to an army of protection, built one quiet act at a time. I love you beyond words, beyond death, beyond all understanding. Forever, your Robert." I looked around the packed room, Julia holding her baby, David beside his new girlfriend, a teacher he'd met at the community college, Manuel with his arm around his daughter visiting from Mexico, Andrew and his wife, Fernando and his family, Marcus and the young man he was mentoring, a 19-year-old who'd been homeless until Marcos found him. Robert hadn't left me alone. He'd left me surrounded by an empire of love disguised as strangers. That evening I sat on the cabin porch. The orchard was in full bloom for its 3rd spring. The cherry trees, stubborn as promised, were finally producing. Manuel had picked a basket that morning. Deep red, perfectly sweet. My phone buzzed. A message from Julia. "Mom, we just found out. It's a girl. We're naming her Roberta." I smiled through tears. Of course it was a girl. Of course Robert would ensure his name carried forward in a granddaughter who'd never carry the weight of expectations placed on sons. The sunset painted the mountains gold. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the creek Robert had ensured would always flow through the property. Above, the first stars appeared, the same stars he'd watched while planning all of this. "I finally understand," I whispered to the twilight. It was never about the money. It was about building a world where I'd be held even after you couldn't hold me. The wind moved through the cherry trees, and cherry blossoms fell like snow, like grace, like secrets finally ready to be known. I picked up a single blossom and pressed it between the pages of Robert's journal. next to his words. A man is not measured by what he possesses, but by what he protects. And in protecting me, he created something larger than himself, a legacy that would ripple forward through generations who'd never know his name, but would live in the shelter of his sacrifice, the silent guardian, the invisible hero, the man who loved so well that even death couldn't stop him from keeping his promises. My Robert.